Obtaining emotional intelligence. How to understand yourself, manage your emotions, and build healthier relationships. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, manage, and respond wisely to emotions, both your own emotions and the emotions of other people. It does not mean that you never become angry, frustrated, disappointed, nervous, or overwhelmed. Instead, emotional intelligence helps you understand what you are feeling, why you may be feeling it, and how to choose a healthy response. Developing emotional intelligence can improve nearly every area of life. It can help you communicate more clearly, handle disagreements more effectively, establish stronger boundaries, make thoughtful decisions, and develop healthier personal and professional relationships. Emotional intelligence can also help you become less reactive. Instead of allowing every difficult situation to control your mood or behavior, you learn how to create space between what happens and how you respond. Emotional intelligence is not necessarily something people are simply born with. It can be developed over time through self-awareness, practice, reflection, communication, and experience. The following areas can help you strengthen your emotional intelligence and become more intentional about the way you handle yourself and interact with others. 1. Developing self-awareness. One of the most important foundations of emotional intelligence is self-awareness. Self-awareness means recognizing your emotions while they are happening instead of only realizing later that you were angry, hurt, embarrassed, jealous, disappointed, or overwhelmed. Many people move through their day reacting automatically. Something happens, an emotion appears, and a reaction immediately follows. Someone makes a disrespectful comment, and they respond angrily. Someone disagrees with them, and they immediately become defensive. A plan falls apart, and frustration takes over. Self-awareness interrupts this automatic process. Begin asking yourself simple questions throughout the day. What am I feeling right now? What happened before I started feeling this way? Why is this situation affecting me so strongly? Sometimes the emotion you initially identify is not the complete emotion. You may think you are angry when underneath that anger you are actually disappointed. You may believe you are irritated when you are really exhausted. You may feel jealous when the deeper issue is insecurity or fear of losing something important. Identifying the true emotion makes it easier to address the real problem. Keeping a journal can strengthen this skill. At the end of the day, think about one emotional situation you experienced. Write down what happened, what you felt, how you responded, and what you might do differently next time. The goal is not to criticize yourself. The goal is to understand yourself. 2. Learning to name your emotions. Another important part of emotional intelligence is developing a stronger emotional vocabulary. People sometimes describe almost every unpleasant emotion as simply being mad, stressed, or upset. However, emotions are much more specific than that. You might be frustrated, embarrassed, rejected, disappointed, impatient, lonely, worried, overwhelmed, discouraged, confused, resentful, insecure, or exhausted. These distinctions matter. Imagine saying, "I'm angry with everyone today." Now compare that with, "I'm overwhelmed because I have too many responsibilities and I don't feel like I have enough time." The second statement gives you something specific to address. If you are overwhelmed, perhaps you need to reorganize your schedule. If you are disappointed, perhaps you need to adjust an expectation. If you are lonely, you may need meaningful connection. If you are frustrated, there may be a problem that needs solving. Naming an emotion doesn't automatically solve it, but it can make the emotion easier to understand. Instead of immediately trying to get rid of uncomfortable emotions, become curious about them. Ask yourself, what exactly am I feeling? What is this emotion trying to tell me? 3. Understanding your emotional triggers. A trigger is something that produces a strong emotional reaction. Triggers can involve criticism, rejection, disrespect, being ignored, losing control of a situation, financial pressure, family disagreements, feeling unappreciated, or having someone challenge your opinion. Emotional intelligence requires learning your personal triggers. Suppose someone gives you constructive criticism and you immediately become defensive. Instead of assuming that the other person is attacking you, examine your reaction. Ask yourself, why does criticism bother me so much? Is there anything useful in what this person is saying? Am I responding to what was actually said, or am I responding to how the situation made me feel? Understanding your triggers gives you more control over your responses. You may not be able to prevent every emotional reaction from occurring, but you can learn to recognize the reaction before acting on it. That small amount of awareness can make an enormous difference. 4. Creating a pause before you react. One of the clearest signs of emotional intelligence is the ability to pause. When emotions become intense, people can say or do things they later regret. A few seconds of restraint can sometimes prevent hours, days, or even years of unnecessary conflict. When you feel yourself becoming emotionally activated, avoid assuming that you must respond immediately. Take a slow breath. Count silently. Walk away for a few minutes if appropriate. Drink some water. Think about what you actually want to accomplish. You can even say, I need a little time to think about this before I respond. That is not weakness. It is emotional regulation. The important question becomes, what response will help this situation instead of making it worse? Sometimes the best response is speaking calmly. Sometimes it is asking a question. Sometimes it is setting a boundary. Sometimes it is saying nothing until you have had enough time to think clearly. The pause gives your reasoning an opportunity to catch up with your emotions. 5. Managing anger without ignoring it. Anger is a normal human emotion. Emotional intelligence does not require pretending that you never become angry. The issue is what you do with the anger. Uncontrolled anger can lead to yelling, insults, impulsive decisions, damaged relationships, and unnecessary conflict. Suppressed anger can also become unhealthy when a person repeatedly ignores problems instead of addressing them. A more emotionally intelligent approach is to acknowledge the anger and determine what is underneath it. Ask yourself, what exactly happened? What boundary was crossed? What am I trying to protect? What outcome do I want now? Then communicate the issue directly without attacking the other person's character. Instead of saying, you never respect me, you might say, I didn't appreciate the way you spoke to me earlier. I want us to discuss disagreements without insulting each other. The second statement addresses the behavior and establishes an expectation. Learning to communicate anger without becoming destructive is a major emotional intelligence skill. 6. Developing emotional self-control. Self-control means understanding that an emotion does not automatically require an action. You can feel angry without yelling. You can feel disappointed without giving up. You can feel jealous without becoming controlling. You can feel nervous without abandoning an important opportunity. You can feel offended without starting an argument. This distinction is extremely important. Emotions provide information, but they do not always provide instructions. When you experience a powerful emotion, ask yourself, if I act on this feeling immediately, what is likely to happen afterward? Think beyond the next 5 minutes. Will sending that angry message improve the relationship? Will quitting immediately solve the problem? Will arguing online accomplish anything meaningful? Emotional self-control involves choosing behavior based on your values and long-term interests rather than temporary emotional intensity. 7. Learning how to handle criticism. Criticism can be uncomfortable because people naturally want to protect their self-image. However, emotional intelligence allows you to separate useful feedback from personal attacks. When someone criticizes you, avoid immediately deciding that everything they said is wrong, or that everything they said is right. Evaluate the information. Ask yourself, is any part of this feedback accurate? Is there something here that could help me improve? If the criticism is constructive, use it. If the criticism is unfair, you do not have to accept it as truth. This is an important balance. Emotional intelligence does not mean becoming overly sensitive to everyone's opinion. It means having enough self-awareness to consider feedback without allowing every opinion to determine how you see yourself. Sometimes the emotionally intelligent response is simply, I'll think about that. 8. Practicing empathy. Emotional intelligence is not only about understanding yourself. It also involves understanding other people. Empathy means attempting to see a situation from another person's perspective. This does not mean agreeing with everything they say or excusing harmful behavior. You can understand someone's feelings while still disagreeing with their actions. When someone is upset, resist the temptation to immediately explain why they shouldn't feel that way. Instead, listen. Ask questions. You might say, "What bothered you most about what happened?" Or, "What would have made the situation better for you?" These questions help you understand the person's experience. Sometimes people do not need immediate advice. They need to know that someone actually heard them. Empathy strengthens relationships because people generally communicate more openly when they feel understood. 9. Becoming a better listener. Listening is one of the most practical emotional intelligence skills. Many conversations involve two people waiting for their opportunity to speak rather than actually listening to each other. Active listening requires attention. Put distractions aside when an important conversation is happening. Listen to the person's words, tone, and concerns. Avoid planning your response while they are still talking. Afterward, make sure you understood correctly. You might say, "So you're saying that the main issue wasn't what happened, but that you felt excluded from the decision. Is that right?" This gives the other person an opportunity to clarify. Good listening can prevent unnecessary conflict because many disagreements are made worse by misunderstanding. Being heard does not guarantee agreement, but it creates a stronger foundation for productive communication. 10. Communicating your feelings clearly. Emotionally intelligent people learn how to communicate feelings without expecting other people to read their minds. Instead of silently becoming resentful, communicate. Instead of hinting repeatedly, speak clearly. Instead of allowing frustration to accumulate until you explode, address problems earlier. For example, instead of saying, "You obviously don't care," you could say, "I felt overlooked when I wasn't included in the conversation." Clear communication focuses on what happened and how it affected you. Avoid exaggerations such as "you always" and "you never" whenever possible. These statements often make the other person defensive and distract from the actual problem. The objective should not simply be winning an argument. The objective should be understanding the problem and determining what needs to happen next. 11. Learning to set healthy boundaries. Emotional intelligence includes knowing where your responsibilities end and another person's responsibilities begin. You are responsible for communicating respectfully. You are not responsible for controlling another person's reaction to your respectful boundary. A boundary might sound like, "I can't take that responsibility on right now. I don't want to discuss this while we're yelling. I need more notice before making plans. I understand that you're upset, but I won't continue the conversation if I'm being insulted." Boundaries are not punishments. They communicate what you are willing and unwilling to participate in. People who struggle with boundaries sometimes say yes when they want to say no and then become resentful afterward. Developing emotional intelligence means becoming comfortable with respectful honesty. You can be kind without agreeing to everything. 12. Accepting that you cannot control other people. One of the greatest sources of emotional frustration is trying to control things that belong to someone else. You cannot control another person's attitude. You cannot control whether everyone likes you. You cannot control whether someone agrees with you. You cannot control every opinion people have about you. You can control your behavior, your communication, your decisions, your boundaries, and your response. Learning this difference can save enormous emotional energy. When you find yourself becoming frustrated with someone's behavior, ask yourself, what part of the situation is actually within my control? Then focus your energy there. This does not mean tolerating mistreatment. If necessary, you can establish boundaries, reduce contact, leave a situation, or communicate consequences. The difference is that you stop trying to force another person to think, feel, or behave exactly as you want. 13. Handling conflict without trying to win. Conflict is inevitable in relationships. Emotionally intelligent conflict resolution focuses on solving the problem rather than defeating the other person. Before entering a difficult conversation, ask yourself, What outcome am I trying to achieve? If your goal is simply proving that you are right, the conversation can quickly become a competition. Instead, identify the actual issue. Speak about one problem at a time. Avoid bringing up 10 unrelated mistakes from the past. Listen to the other person's perspective. Look for areas where you agree. Then discuss what needs to change moving forward. Sometimes there will be no perfect agreement. Emotional intelligence also includes knowing when respectful disagreement is enough. Not every difference needs to become a battle. 14. Taking responsibility for your mistakes. Emotional maturity requires accountability. When you make a mistake, acknowledge it. Avoid automatically blaming circumstances, stress, another person, or misunderstanding. You can explain why something happened without avoiding responsibility for what you did. A meaningful apology might sound like, "I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. I was frustrated, but that doesn't excuse how I handled the situation. I apologize." Notice that the apology does not include an immediate counterattack. Accountability strengthens emotional intelligence because it requires you to look at yourself objectively. Making a mistake does not mean you are a terrible person. Refusing to learn from repeated mistakes, however, can prevent emotional growth. 15. Developing resilience after disappointment. Emotional intelligence becomes especially important when life does not go according to plan. You may experience rejection, business setbacks, financial difficulties, broken relationships, failed plans, criticism, or unexpected changes. Resilience does not mean pretending that disappointment doesn't hurt. It means allowing yourself to experience the emotion without allowing the experience to permanently define you. After a setback, ask yourself 3 questions. What happened? What can I learn from it? What can I do next? This shifts your attention from endless emotional replay toward problem solving. Some situations require time before you can move forward, and that is understandable. But eventually, emotional intelligence asks you to turn experience into information. 16. Avoiding emotional assumptions. Emotions can feel extremely convincing. You may feel ignored, but that doesn't automatically mean someone intentionally ignored you. You may feel rejected, but that doesn't necessarily mean you are unwanted. You may feel like something will fail, but that feeling is not proof of the future. Emotional intelligence teaches you to separate feelings from facts. When an emotion becomes intense, ask, what do I actually know? What am I assuming? Is there another reasonable explanation? This practice is especially useful in relationships and communication. A delayed response to a message could mean many things. Assuming the worst can create emotional distress before you have enough information to know what actually happened. Feel your emotions, but investigate your assumptions. 17. Strengthening patience. Patience is another form of emotional regulation. You will encounter slow progress, difficult people, delayed results, mistakes, traffic, interruptions, and situations that do not happen according to your preferred timeline. Impatience can turn minor inconveniences into major emotional experiences. Practice noticing the moment impatience begins. Instead of repeatedly thinking, "This should be happening faster," redirect your attention toward what you can productively do while waiting. Patience does not mean becoming passive. You can take action while accepting that some outcomes require time. This skill is especially valuable when pursuing long-term goals. Emotional intelligence helps you tolerate temporary frustration without abandoning something important too quickly. 18. Practicing self-compassion without making excuses. Emotional intelligence includes the way you speak to yourself. Some people speak to themselves far more harshly than they would ever speak to another person. After making a mistake, they may think, "I'm terrible at everything. I always mess things up." That type of thinking usually does not improve performance. A healthier response is honest but constructive. "I handled that poorly. What should I do differently next time?" Self-compassion does not mean avoiding accountability. It means correcting yourself without destroying yourself. You can acknowledge a mistake, repair what you can, learn from it, and move forward. 19. Becoming comfortable with difficult emotions. One of the strongest signs of emotional intelligence is learning that uncomfortable emotions do not always need to be eliminated immediately. Sometimes you will be disappointed. Sometimes you will feel nervous before doing something important. Sometimes you will feel sadness after losing something meaningful. Sometimes you will be frustrated while learning something difficult. Trying to escape every uncomfortable feeling can actually make emotional regulation more difficult. Instead, practice saying, "This is uncomfortable, but I can handle being uncomfortable for a while." Then choose a healthy action. Go for a walk. Write your thoughts down. Talk with someone you trust. Work on the problem. Rest if you are exhausted. Emotions naturally change over time. You do not have to make a permanent decision because of a temporary feeling. 20. Developing emotional intelligence in relationships. Relationships provide one of the greatest opportunities to practice emotional intelligence. Healthy relationships require communication, listening, boundaries, empathy, accountability, and compromise. Pay attention to patterns. Do you shut down during disagreements? Do you become defensive? Do you interrupt? Do you avoid difficult conversations until resentment builds? Do you expect other people to know what you need without telling them? Recognizing patterns gives you something specific to improve. Before responding during a disagreement, ask yourself, am I trying to understand this person, or am I only trying to defend myself? Sometimes changing that single question can change the entire conversation. 21. Emotional intelligence in the workplace and business. Emotional intelligence is also extremely valuable professionally. Business involves customers, coworkers, employees, vendors, competitors, criticism, deadlines, financial pressure, and unexpected problems. Technical ability may help someone enter an opportunity, but emotional intelligence can influence how well they handle the people and pressures surrounding that opportunity. A dissatisfied customer, for example, does not necessarily require an emotional response. First, determine what happened. Listen carefully. Separate the customer's emotional tone from the actual issue. Determine whether the complaint is legitimate. Then decide what solution is reasonable. The same principle applies to negotiations and professional disagreements. The goal is to avoid allowing another person's emotional intensity to automatically determine your own. Calm thinking can become a competitive advantage. 22. Recognizing when you need rest. Emotional intelligence also involves recognizing how physical exhaustion can affect emotions. When people are extremely tired, hungry, overwhelmed, or constantly stressed, patience can decrease and irritability can increase. Sometimes an emotional problem is partly a capacity problem. You may need sleep. You may need a break. You may need food. You may need quiet. You may need to reduce your workload temporarily. Before assuming that everything around you has suddenly become unbearable, consider your physical condition. Taking care of your basic needs can make emotional regulation easier. 23. Practicing gratitude and perspective. Emotional intelligence does not require ignoring problems or pretending everything is positive. However, perspective matters. When one frustrating event happens, avoid allowing it to define your entire day. You can acknowledge that something went wrong while also recognizing what is still going right. At the end of the day, think about 3 things that went well, even if they were small. Perhaps you completed an important task. Maybe someone helped you. Maybe you handled a difficult situation better than you would have 6 months ago. This practice trains your attention to notice progress rather than focusing exclusively on problems. 24. Learning from emotional experiences. Every emotional experience can become information. After an argument, ask yourself what you learned. After a disappointment, examine your expectations. After becoming overwhelmed, determine whether you took on too much. After responding calmly to something that previously would have caused an argument, recognize your progress. Emotional intelligence develops through repetition. You experience something. You recognize the emotion. You examine the situation. You choose a response. You evaluate the result. Then you adjust. Over time, this process becomes more natural. 25. Building emotional intelligence as a daily lifestyle. Obtaining emotional intelligence is not about reaching a point where nothing bothers you anymore. That is unrealistic. The goal is becoming increasingly aware of your emotions and increasingly intentional about your behavior. Start small. When you wake up, check in with yourself emotionally. Throughout the day, notice when your mood changes. When something triggers you, pause before responding. During conversations, practice listening without interrupting. When you make a mistake, acknowledge it. When someone else makes a mistake, determine whether the situation requires correction, forgiveness, boundaries, or simply patience. Before bed, reflect on the day. Ask yourself, what emotion affected me most today? What triggered it? How did I respond? Was my response helpful? What could I do differently tomorrow? This daily reflection gradually builds emotional awareness. Conclusion: emotional intelligence is a skill you continue building. Emotional intelligence is not about becoming emotionless. It is about becoming emotionally skilled. You will still experience anger, disappointment, excitement, fear, frustration, sadness, joy, uncertainty, and hope. The difference is that you become better at understanding those emotions without automatically being controlled by them. You learn when to speak and when to wait. You learn when to compromise and when to establish a boundary. You learn how to listen without immediately becoming defensive. You learn that another person's emotions do not always have to become your emotions. You learn to recognize your triggers, question your assumptions, communicate your needs, accept responsibility for your behavior, and recover from difficult experiences. Most importantly, emotional intelligence grows through practice. Every disagreement gives you an opportunity to practice communication. Every frustration gives you an opportunity to practice patience. Every mistake gives you an opportunity to practice accountability. Every disappointment gives you an opportunity to practice resilience. Every relationship gives you an opportunity to practice empathy. You do not need to master everything at once. Choose one area and begin there. Perhaps your first goal is pausing before responding when you are angry. Perhaps it is becoming a better listener. Maybe you need stronger boundaries, greater patience, or better awareness of your emotional triggers. As you practice these skills consistently, you can begin responding to life more thoughtfully instead of simply reacting to whatever happens around you. That is the real strength of emotional intelligence. You cannot control every situation, every person, or every emotion that appears, but you can continue improving how you understand, manage, and respond to them. James 1 verses 19 to 20, New King James Version. So then, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man does not produce the righteousness of God. That's it for this video. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned for our next video. Can you kindly press the like button, subscribe, share, and comment?